Welcome back to the Story of Liberty. This is your host, John Bona. You've heard that phrase that freedom is not free. Liberty is not free. John Quincy Adams, one of the earliest presidents, he made a declaration. He said, "Posterity, you will never know how much it has cost my generation to preserve your freedom. I hope you make good use of it." The question is, America, have we? I'm afraid that in recent years, we would not testify honestly that we have. I thought it was interesting to read recently that the early Congress, it was actually the second Congress, they passed a law stating that all U.S. coins would have on the reverse side of that coin a image of liberty. These coins had come in many different forms. They decided to do that because other countries always had put the face of a king or something like that on their coin. But the Congress, the early Congress, wanted the American people to be aware of this great gift of liberty we have in America. And so every time you were given a coin or handed a coin to somebody, they would be reminded of the precious gift and not to take it for granted. Well, I'm looking at a quarter here, and liberty is on there, the word liberty, and it says, "In God we trust." I'm looking at a dime here, 2006, says "Liberty, in God we trust" on the front. But the image of liberty itself is taken off. I don't know if there's been a coin made for several decades in circulation with the image of liberty upon it. That's interesting. You know, the Bible has a great deal to say about liberty. In fact, it's one of the major themes of Scripture. You may remember in the Old Testament, well, they went to Egypt. They were enslaved, the Israel people, for 430 years. Finally, Moses brought them out of that bondage into their own land. And then years again later, they were held captive in Babylon for 70 years. No freedom, no liberty. You know, Christ said in his very first message to planet Earth, he said that he came to set the captives free. Think about that. That was his first message when it began, that story in Nazareth, when the author of liberty, Christ, gave his first sermon to his home synagogue. He opened the scroll to Isaiah 61 and he read the prophecy of the purpose of his coming. He detailed that he came to heal the brokenhearted, the blind, and to preach the gospel to the poor. But when he came to the subject of liberty, he said he came to set the captives free. And then he repeated it a second time, saying he came to set those free in bondage. Well, when Christ finished reading, he sat down and told the men that this prophecy had been fulfilled in their midst. Folks, the liberation of planet Earth began that day, and Christ unleashed his loving message of redemption and the powers and the principles that would bring liberty to the nations. Also, the Apostle Paul made it very clear that before there can be civil liberty, there has to be personal freedom. And Christ is the great author of liberty, and the only one that could set us free from the guilt of sin. He says, "For sin shall not have dominion over you," in Romans 6:14. So folks, we can be set free. It's this same Christ who has given us liberty in this land. You know, we think of liberty as something that a lot of people have in the world, but they don't. There's only about 26, 27 nations out of the 200 that know anything about liberty. most of them are enslaved. And as far as religious liberty is concerned, well, until America proclaimed religious liberty, there wasn't a single nation in the whole world that had ever known religious freedom. Where it exists in the world today is simply copying what we were given by God. I couldn't help to think about the old book, George Orwell's old book, 1984 it was called. I remember my parents telling me about that. It caused millions of people around the world to actually become very frightened until the year 1984 arrived. Suddenly, we were going to find ourselves in the land of the Big Brother. That was the fear. By the way, you may remember George Orwell. He was a communist when he was young. And he was sympathetic to communism, socialism. He thought it worked. So he went to live in the Soviet Union, the communist Soviet Union. Well, he came back after a while and he was shocked to the core what he had seen in the terrible life of those in the Soviet Union. He wrote 1984. He was so influenced by it. He understood that the re-education process in the Soviet Union, it happened gradually. Well, you may remember the book. If you haven't read it, read it. 1984 it's called, George Orwell. The hero in the book finally escaped from this total tyrannical government in which he lived, where Big Brother was controlling his entire life, everything he did, all his actions, all his speech. But he rebelled and he fled. But as expected, the Big Brother caught up with him and he placed him in one of his re-indoctrination prisons. He was trained until finally not only did he submit, but the final words in that book, 1984, is something that rings in your mind after you read it. When he says, "Big Brother, I love you." This is what can be done to the human mind through the indoctrination process in a communist country, socialism. So the question we have to ask is, what has happened to that flame of liberty that so moved our founding fathers? Abraham Lincoln said, "Our fathers brought forth upon this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty." Our Declaration says it too, that next to life itself, the most important right we have is liberty. So that is a great truth, that the source of our liberty comes from God. It comes from Christ, who alone can make people free. You know, everywhere on this planet where people are free, and they can stand up and be counted against the tyrant and say, "No further shall you go," it is because of the Christian faith, their belief in God, and they have followed those principles. Political, economic, and religious liberty. We take it for granted, yet there are so few nations in the world that really enjoy it. Recently, we have seen another attack on our religious liberty, where the city of Santa Monica, California, they closed down a nativity scene that's been in that park in that city for 60 years. 60 years, and now they said, no more nativity scene. Well, folks, I hope somebody out there hears me in Santa Monica. I have a recommendation. Local churches get together, rent a flatbed truck, put a nativity scene on it, and drive it around that park all day and night. Don't let them steal our religious liberty, our Christian faith. And let's remember that the highest glory of the American Revolution was what? To get rid of the Stamp Act or to reduce taxes on tea? No, John Quincy Adams, the president, said, the highest glory of the American Revolution was this. It connected in one indissoluble bond the principles of civil government with the principles of Christianity. You may say, wait a minute, what about separation of church and state? Oh, well, there we go again. Wrong again. George Washington, our first president, said it this way. He said, true religion offers to government its surest support. George Washington, he went on to say that any person or group like these people in Santa Monica, California, the city council that has shut down this beautiful nativity scene that's been there 60 years, when they labor, as they have, to subvert the twin pillars of morality and religion, which are the surest support of true government, they should not claim the title of patriot. Because, folks, those are the very foundations of our government.